On February 3, 1945, 1944, nearly 1,000 American B-17 flying fortresses appear in the skies over Berlin. Their target is the government and administrative district of the German capital, and the ensuing bombardment stuns the heart of the Third Reich. But as high explosive bombs and incendiaries rain down, one specific hit sets off a panic that will echo through the chaotic final days of World War II. The headquarters of the German Reichsbank, the central bank of the Nazi state, takes a direct hit. The massive building is severely damaged, its upper floors engulfed in flames, and its administrative capacity paralyzed. So how does a single bombing raid trigger the desperate, chaotic evacuation of billions in gold reserves across a collapsing empire, leading to a sprawling logistical nightmare, a race against Allied armies, and one of the greatest unsolved geopolitical mysteries of the 20th century? In 1945, the Reichsbank holds the accumulated wealth of an empire built on conquest and plunder. Since the late 1930s, the Nazi regime has systematically drained the treasuries of annexed and occupied nations. When Austria is absorbed in the 1938 Anschluss, its entire gold reserve is immediately transferred to Berlin. The same fate befalls the national banks of Czechoslovakia, Poland, Belgium, and the Netherlands. By the height of the war, the German central bank sits on a staggering fortune, estimated to be worth well over $238 million in 1945 dollars. But this immense wealth is not just national currency. It is the financial lifeblood of the German war machine, desperately needed to purchase vital raw materials like tungsten from neutral countries such as Spain and Portugal. Without this gold, the German armaments industry would grind to a halt. Furthermore, the vaults contain something far darker than standard bullion. The SS systematically loots the victims of the Holocaust, melting down wedding rings, jewelry, and dental gold into anonymous ingots that are quietly deposited into special Reichsbank accounts under fictitious names like Max Heiliger. This blood gold is mixed with the national reserves, creating a financial stockpile tainted by unprecedented atrocities. For Reichsbank President Walter Funk, the February 3rd bombing is a catastrophic wake-up call. The structural integrity of the bank's vaults in Berlin is compromised, and the Red Army is advancing rapidly from the east, while American and British forces push relentlessly from the west. Funk realizes that keeping the entire gold reserve in a single, heavily targeted city is a recipe for total financial annihilation. He desperately needs to secure the Reich's assets to fund what remains of the war effort, or perhaps to bankroll a post-war insurgency. He turns to his deputies and orders an immediate, top-secret evacuation of the gold, currency, and art treasures. The Reichsbank is burning, a junior official writes in a frantic memo. We must secure the assets before the capital is entirely encircled. The survival of the state depends upon it. The logistical challenge is monumental. The German railway network, the Reichsbahn, is in tatters, systematically dismantled by relentless Allied tactical bombing. Locomotives are scarce, rail yards are twisted ruins, and fuel is in critically short supply. Yet, under the direct orders of the highest authorities, a special train codenamed Adler is assembled. Over several frantic nights in mid-February, Reichsbank officials, aided by heavily armed SS guards and forced laborers, begin loading the wealth of Europe onto the train. They haul nearly 1,000 bags of gold bullion, massive quantities of foreign currency, and priceless cultural artifacts into the armored boxcars. Their destination is the Kaiseroda potassium mine in the small town of Merkers, located in the central German region of Thuringia. Merkers is chosen for its deep, subterranean tunnels, far out of reach of Allied bombers, and its relatively stable climate, ideal for preserving sensitive documents and artwork. The journey to Merkers is perilous. The train creeps through the shattered German countryside, hiding in tunnels during the day to avoid prowling Allied fighter bombers, and moving only under the cover of darkness. The guards are under strict orders to shoot anyone who approaches the carriages. Upon arriving in Merkers in late February, the monumental task of unloading begins. SS officers press local miners and slave laborers into service. Over several days, the bags of gold, crates of currency, and stolen art are lowered over 2,000 feet down the main mine shaft. They are stacked in a massive cavern, room number 8, a space carved out of the solid rock salt. A heavy steel bank vault door is hastily installed at the entrance to the cavern. For a brief moment, Funk and the Reichsbank officials believe the treasure is safe. They plan to use it to sustain the government if Berlin falls, perhaps setting up a new capital in the rumored Alpine Fortress in the south. But the speed of the Allied advance shatters German calculations. By late March 1945, the U.S. Third Army, under the command of General George S Patton, bursts across the Rhine River and drives deep into central Germany. The American armored columns advance with terrifying speed, bypassing strong points and plunging into the German rear. On April 4th, combat elements of the 90th Infantry Division enter the Merkers area. They are not looking for gold, they are looking for remaining pockets of German resistance. However, war is fought with soldiers, but it is also defined by the unexpected intelligence gathered on the ground. Military police strictly enforce a curfew in the town, but the civilian population, exhausted and hungry, is talkative. On the morning of April 6th, 2 American military policemen, Private First Class Richard Moots and Private First Class John P. Reinhardt, are questioning 2 displaced French women who had been forced to work in the area. The women casually mention that the local mine contains a vast treasure brought from Berlin. "The whole of the gold of the Reichsbank is down there," one woman tells them. "We saw the trucks, we saw the SS. They brought it weeks ago." The military police report this seemingly unbelievable claim up the chain of command. It reaches Lieutenant Colonel William A. Russell, the local civil affairs officer. Skeptical but intrigued, Russell questions a local German mining official, who confirms the story. The official reveals that Dr. Werner Feith, the Reichsbank's cashier, is still in the town. American troops move quickly to secure the Kaiseroda mine. They locate Dr. Feith and demand he open the facility. Early on the morning of April 7th, an American detachment descends the perilous, creaking elevator shaft, plunging hundreds of meters into the cold darkness of the salt mine. When they reach room number 8, they find the heavy steel door. It takes engineers several hours and a controlled explosive charge to blow the locks. What the Americans find inside stuns them. The cavern is lit by temporary work lights, revealing an incredible sight. General George S Patton later describes the scene in his diary. "We went down a shaft some 2,100 feet. We then went into a cave where there was an enormous number of bags. We opened one and it contained gold bars. There was also a large amount of paper money, and in other caves there were great quantities of art. It was the most impressive sight I have ever seen." The inventory at Merkers is staggering. American officials tally 8,198 bars of gold bullion, 55 boxes of crated gold bullion, hundreds of bags of gold coins, 711 bags of American $20 gold pieces, and millions in Swiss francs, British pounds, and US dollars. They also discover the gruesome reality of the SS loot. Bags filled with flattened gold crowns, silver plate, and jewelry stolen from concentration camp victims. The capture of the Merkers mine is a massive strategic victory for the Allies, depriving the collapsing Nazi regime of a vast portion of its financial reserves. The treasure is quickly transported under heavy guard to the Reichsbank building in Frankfurt, which is now in American hands, to be secured and eventually catalogued for restitution. But the discovery at Merkers is not the end of the story. It is merely the beginning of a deeper mystery. When Allied financial investigators begin to cross-reference the recovered gold with captured Reichsbank ledgers, they realize a massive discrepancy. The Merkers hoard accounts for roughly 70% of the known German central bank reserves. The remaining 30%, a fortune still worth hundreds of millions, is missing. Where is the rest of the gold? The answer lies in the desperate, fragmented decisions of the dying regime. While the bulk of the gold went to Merkers in February, Funk and his deputy, Emil Pohl, had retained a significant reserve in Berlin to maintain the illusion of a functioning state economy and to pay the diplomatic corps and international suppliers. But by mid-April, the Soviet Red Army is at the gates of Berlin. The booming of Soviet artillery can be heard in the Reichsbank courtyard. The situation is untenable. On April 14th, Funk orders the immediate evacuation of the remaining Berlin reserves. This time, the destination is not central Germany, which is rapidly being overrun by the Americans, but the south, the mountains of Bavaria. The Nazi High Command is obsessed with the concept of the Alpine Fortress, or Alpenfestung. It is a mythical, highly fortified redoubt in the rugged mountains of southern Germany and Austria, where hardcore SS units and loyalists supposedly plan to wage a protracted guerrilla war against the Allies. While the physical defenses of the Alpine Fortress are largely a propaganda myth, the geographical reality dictates the final movements of the Reich's wealth. If the state is to survive in the mountains, it needs money. A second special train, codenamed Kaiser Wilhelm, is hastily assembled. Under the cover of darkness and constant air raid sirens, SS troops load the remaining gold, foreign currency, and highly sensitive state documents. The train departs Berlin on April 15th, embarking on a treacherous journey south. The rail lines are completely shattered. The Kaiser Wilhelm is repeatedly forced to reroute to stop in tunnels to avoid Allied strafing and wait for engineers to repair bombed-out tracks ahead of it. The journey that should take hours takes days. Panic begins to infect the operation. Accompanying the train are high-ranking SS officers, led by Ernst Kaltenbrunner, the brutal head of the Reich Security Main Office. Kaltenbrunner sees the gold not just as state property, but as a bargaining chip or a means to finance an underground Nazi network after the inevitable surrender. By the time the train reaches Munich on April 19th, the situation is catastrophic. The U.S. 7th Army is closing in on the city. The rail lines further south into the Alps are completely severed. The gold can go no further by train. In a scene of absolute chaos at the Munich rail yards, the SS commandeers a fleet of military trucks. The gold and currency are furiously transferred from the boxcars to the trucks. The convoy, heavily armed and operating under extreme secrecy, drives out of Munich just ahead of the American advance, heading deep into the Bavarian Alps towards the town of Mittenwald and the surrounding mountain passes. The Mittenwald area is a rugged, deeply forested region, characterized by steep valleys and isolated alpine lakes. It is the perfect place to hide something. As the convoy winds its way into the mountains, discipline begins to break down. The war is clearly lost. Hitler will commit suicide in Berlin just days later. The men guarding the gold realize that the fortune they are carrying is their only ticket to survival in the lawless vacuum of a collapsed state. The centralized command structure dissolves. Various factions, Wehrmacht officers, SS men, and local Nazi Party officials begin to eye the treasure. According to post-war testimonies, the convoy is split up. Some of the trucks head towards the Einsiedel Foresters Lodge near the Walchensee. Here, under the direction of SS Colonel Josef Spacel, a portion of the currency is frantically distributed to fleeing SS officers, supposedly to pay their troops or fund their escape via rat lines to South America. Millions of dollars simply vanish into rucksacks and the deep pockets of desperate men fleeing into the mountains. But what about the heavy gold bullion? It cannot be easily carried on foot over alpine passes. In the final days of April, desperate orders are given to bury the remaining gold. A group of Wehrmacht soldiers and SS men dig deep trenches near a remote hunting lodge on the Klausenkopf mountain, just outside Mittenwald. Under the cover of darkness, they bury hundreds of gold bars, covering the caches with earth and pine needles. Other factions reportedly bury smaller caches in surrounding valleys, creating a decentralized map of buried wealth. The men involved are sworn to secrecy under pain of death, but secrets in a collapsing empire rarely hold. When the U.S. Army finally occupies Mittenwald in early May, they are met with a swirl of rumors. Local civilians report seeing heavily laden trucks driving into the forests at night and returning empty. Displaced persons and captured German soldiers whisper about buried treasure. Allied intelligence services, including the OSS, launch a frantic investigation. They interrogate captured Reichsbank officials and SS officers. The interrogations are difficult. The Germans are evasive, offering contradictory stories. Some claim the gold was sent to Austria, others say it was distributed, others deny its existence entirely. Emil Pohl, captured by the Americans, is interrogated relentlessly. I know the gold left Berlin. I know it went south. But once it reached the mountains, control was lost. The SS took over. You must ask Kaltenbrunner. Interrogation transcript, Emil Pohl. In the summer of 1945, relying on informants and grueling interrogations, American forces begin to uncover some of the caches. They dig up the Klausenkopf site, recovering a significant portion of the bullion. But the math still does not add up. The recovered gold from Merkers and Mittenwald, combined with the scattered currency seized from arrested SS officers, still falls short of the total known reserves from the Berlin ledgers. Millions of dollars in gold and currency remain unaccounted for. The missing wealth fuels decades of intense speculation, treasure hunting, and geopolitical intrigue. Rumors focus heavily on the deep, dark alpine lakes of the region, particularly Lake Toplitz in Austria. Toplitz is known to have been a secret naval testing facility during the war. Locals report seeing SS troops dumping heavy crates into the lake in the final days of the conflict. In 1959, an expedition sponsored by the German magazine Stern dives into Lake Toplitz. They make a startling discovery, but it is not gold. They find millions of perfectly forged British pound notes. This is the remnants of Operation Bernhard, the massive Nazi counterfeiting scheme designed to collapse the British economy. The discovery of the forged currency in the lake only heightens the belief that the missing gold must also be hidden in similar, watery graves. But the reality of the missing Reichsbank gold is likely far more pragmatic and insidious than a single, untouched treasure chest sitting at the bottom of a lake. In the chaotic vacuum of May 1945, the wealth was fractured. A significant portion was almost certainly stolen by the very individuals tasked with protecting it: SS officers, Wehrmacht commanders, and Nazi officials who used the gold to buy new identities, secure passage to South America, or establish comfortable post-war lives. The decentralized nature of the burial meant that those with the maps held the power. Some of these individuals quietly returned to the mountains years later, digging up their illicit pensions. Furthermore, the missing gold plays a complex role in the early Cold War. There are persistent, though difficult to verify, allegations that some of the missing funds were quietly absorbed by Allied intelligence agencies, used to finance covert operations against the Soviet Union in the tense years following the war. Former SS men, trading their knowledge of buried caches for immunity or employment, may have handed over portions of the wealth to the very powers that defeated them. The lines between state treasure, personal loot, and intelligence black funds blurred in the mountains of Bavaria. The story of the Reichsbank gold is a stark illustration of the collapse of the Third Reich. It exposes a regime that, beneath its veneer of order and ideology, descended into a frantic, corrupt scramble for survival and wealth. It is a story of immense logistics, of trains running through shattered landscapes, and of brutal betrayals in isolated mountain passes. While the majority of the wealth was recovered and eventually returned to the central banks of Europe, the missing millions continue to haunt the Alpine valleys. It remains a historical void, a puzzle of missing ledgers, contradictory testimonies, and empty trenches. The true fate of every last gold bar will likely never be known, buried beneath decades of silence, greed, and the deep shadows of the Cold War. The hunt for the missing gold of 1945 happened just as the geopolitical landscape was fracturing into the Cold War. It was in that moment that the alliances of World War II broke down, replaced by a desperate scramble for resources, intelligence, and leverage. The missing millions from the Reichsbank became just another weapon in a new, silent conflict.